right. Welcome to Galactic Explorers with myself, Dallas, and the lovely and wild, as always, Daniella. Welcome to the podcast where we take you on a joyride through earthly, spiritual, and everyday topics explored with a galactic perspective. Today, we're going in about death rituals and exploring the cultures, how they all kind of handle death. Right? We just celebrated Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Today is in honor of All Souls Day, so we wanted to pull out some exploration of how people handle death.
Yeah.
I think here in America, we fear death. We don't talk about it. We don't honor it, or, it's something that's just kind of taboo. We don't go there. We're scared to talk about wills. We're scared to talk about the process or how the body is going to be handled afterwards. It's kind of shone at, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah. Shunned.
Yeah, shunned. So weird. I kind of wanted to talk about, though, first of the process of where we are now from where we started. And for starting with the United States is the Native American culture, how they've treated the land and was more, I think it's called animism.
Yes.
Right? Okay, I want to make sure I pronounce that right. Yep. Where a majority of the tribes, right, because there's so many tribes across the North Country, that they believed that we were all the same. Everything that had a life, rocks, water, trees, dirt, the ground, the earth that we lived on, it was all connected, and we were all connected. So a lot of the tribes saw death as a passage for the soul, and they would give the body back to earth where they would bury it, or they would burn the body and spread the ashes, or even give to the animals. Some places they would leave the body out, and the animals would, it's a cycle of life that they thought. So, and then they honor it with dance and drumming. They had the kachinas, which, helps the soul. So there's that kind of Native Americans before settlers were more in tune with death and honored it. It's an honor to die and to come back as an animal, or an ancestor.
Move on to the next phase. It's like you're moving on to the next cycle. It's not like you're not really going anywhere. Because if we're all here and we're all one and all part of that energy, then it's their mindset, I've always felt, was so much less about losing somebody.
Right. Yes.
Than just it's like honoring the time they had with them here, and then celebrating their passage into another cycle of their journey.
Right.
Rather than the way that a lot of Western culture approaches death, which is, like you said, very solemn, and it's got a lot of taboo to it. And it's a lot of the ideas and things having to do with the preparation and of the body and all of this is very like shunned, to talk about. And, it's like, you don't talk about that in open company, or, like whatever. I've heard that stuff before, where it's, so it's, I think, led to, I think not talking about it has led to, it's like a perpetuation of that whole it's taboo thing.
Sure, most definitely. And it's led to also of, how religions handle it, so now that, the settlers have imposed ourselves here, and then the natives had to kind of blend in, and now a majority of the tribes are Christian or follow different faiths, that kind of, they just had to evolve where their surroundings, where they've lost a lot of that connection. Even with,
or it's like hidden. What I've seen happen a lot too is it gets hidden right in plain sight.
Definitely. I like that.
They do that. I've seen a lot of indigenous cultures. It's for instance, it might be up in some of the examples I want to share later, but I do remember specifically there was an Andean, like in the Andes, a culture that they still had shaman, but it's like the shaman wore crosses and, had the statue of Mary next to the bowl of fruit and flowers and things that were an offering. So it's like they use the plant medicine in offering to a different named god, so that they could kind of fly under the radar and still practice their own traditions, just with a different name on it. And I know that the situation in of itself was way more complicated and involved than that simple explanation. But essentially, a lot of the traditions that we may feel we may have lost may actually have been preserved, kind of hidden in plain sight in that way. And that would be really interesting to be able to explore that too at one point.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel it's still there. There are still a lot of tribes and Native Americans that hold their family stories or rituals where they do it definitely differently.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can't really build a huge mound right now, and unless you have a big land or something,
right.
or that's that reservation and that's how they do it.
Right.
But there's what did I want to say? Yeah, you're completely right. And I feel that death, having Native American run through my blood, have come to some ways of like drumming, and opening that gateway of connecting with ancestors or that lineage, and kind of still honoring it in some spots or parts, is what I meant to say. I'm losing my train of thought.
We were talking about how the settlers kind of evolved. It's like a forced evolution of
right
the different rituals that the people used to deal with death.
Yeah,
that's where we were going with that. Is that the evolution of like the Western Christian settlers coming in and from all over the place. I mean, it happened all over the world.
Sure, definitely.
But that was like you were going into that evolution of where it was evolving from animism into monotheism, and that whole idea of what did that do to our beliefs and our ritual system dealing with death is where you grew up.
What? Exactly.
Once I'm the one that kept you on track. Yay! Because usually it's me.
It's okay.
I'm glad I could help you with that. Happy to be of service.
Yeah, so Native Americans once was with the earth, and now they've kind of almost disconnected in a way, but now we have our settlers, and they've moved in, and as they learn the lay of the lands, that kind of shifted Native Americans out, but then also to try to blend in with living with these settlers. And even for the early settlers, that they did at-home death, took care of the body, everybody had a job, and then it was just you move on with life. And it got to a point where medicine came more involved, everything's evolving, and hospitals and doctors' offices where people went and to die or to extend their life, right, with medicine. And then here we are of living longer. Maybe we're on more medicine, and the quality of life that we have is not as good as, where am I going? I meant to say it opposite way. It's best to have more of a quality of life than the length of life.
Yeah.
but it's reversed right now.
In a lot of cases, for a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, and because death is final. Death is it. It's a fear base where
Right.
you're trying to prolong something, much like a cancer patient, let's say.
Right.
Where they're going to go through all these chemo treatments and visits and medicine and experience to hopefully that, whatever, there's so many stages, but those that are, are you going to go through that, or do you just want to live the best few days of your life?
Right. And that is a choice that a lot of people have to make, is, quality over quantity.
Right.
I mean, and regardless of, even if it's not something like cancer, even if it's just of old age at this point.
Oh yeah.
There's people that are in their 70s and 80s that are healthier than people that I know that are in their 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's such a varied factor now as to like when anyone is going to die or could pass. And again, you could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and be the healthiest person on the planet, and vegan and running and this and that. You just
right.
never know, right? But it's interesting how we've come to deal with it, though, from the more Christian monotheistic perspective that's come in, because it changed the rituals on us, in a sense, because all of these other indigenous cultures that like we'll share about in a little bit, but you'll notice that because they're either more indigenous, or it's because it's of a completely different belief system than the Western Christian belief system, say something like Buddhism or like that, where it comes from a different background and place and culture, and a lot of how it was enacted, that religion is different. How it was spread and how it was used was different. And you'll see that they're still holding on to a lot of their original traditions that are nowhere near as, like you said, like solemn and afraid of death. Because I think, and you could speak to this too, because you come from this background, and so do I a bit, is that when you grow up in the church, you grow up with a fear of God, in the sense that if you don't do how you're supposed to do, then you go into hell. And hell is a nasty ass place that nobody wants to go. So that's where all this fear of death comes in all of a sudden, where it's like we think that, when we die, our immortal soul is going to be tortured for the rest of eternity if we don't do what the pastor tells us. And bringing that in, and that whole aspect of death, it makes it sad. It's like, oh, they're gone, and they're gone off to this other place, and we'll never be able to talk to them again. We can't contact them again. They're gone, either to heaven or hell. Totally put a break in that contact of lineage, because like you were sharing, the Native Americans knew, that if Wise grandmother passed, then just be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, she's probably just going to go hang out in that tree. So, to put it very simply, but it's like they knew that they could contact her again. They knew that she would show up again. They knew that that she wasn't gone.
Right.
And now we live in a society that is the remnant of another society, where they started to take it into a place of fear about death, and that your immortal soul either dies, like it's gone, or it gets tortured, or likewise you go off to the angels and we still never see you again until we die.
Right. Exactly.
So I think that that's where we've come up with a bit of a conundrum as to how we celebrate the passing of a life in a cycle, and the kind of emphasis and energies that we put toward it and around it, and the rituals dealing with it.
Of course, it's become a big business, but then also such a small, meaningless thing.
Isn't that crazy?
Know what I mean?
It's like, how is that? Like, yeah, there's a definite dichotomy to it, because the people, well, I mean, certainly there's exceptions, but it's become rampant in the fact that the people, it's like when they get old, it's like people don't care about them anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so and then it almost becomes a hassle to have to deal with the funeral arrangements when they finally do pass.
Mm-hmm. It's a nuisance. It's
right.
I gotta take time to do this. I gotta do this for this, or it's. And I'm not saying every person
right
is like this, but it's there and it's there.
Right.
It's there, and it's like even dealing with like me and my brother talk about it with my mom. Like what we but actually we haven't really talked about it, to be honest with you, in that kind of sense.
Yeah.
But anyways, scratch that
out. I mean, no, it's useful because there you go. I mean, there's literally a life experience of where you would want to talk about it. And there has been this belief system and programming put into most of our society where it's like it's just not something that you talk about. You sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And you deal with it how, like you deal with it as, little hands-on as possible, and you put as little emotion into it as possible because you don't want to feel hurt. Because I mean, like it's all a self-preservation game of the life. It's so weird, as opposed to celebrating and just recognizing that the person is not gone, but just on another plane of existence that you can still have access to.
Of course. And
well, I mean, I think it's important for the viewers to hear that's like, but we have these real life experiences too, where it's like you've got a brother.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't want to talk about it. Where, so
right.
We may have viewers that are in that same boat where it's like they would like to talk about it and explore it and figure out really truly how they would prefer to feel about it and celebrate it or commemorate or honor.
Yeah.
But they may be dealing with friends and family that aren't there, aren't at that wavelength.
Yeah, because it's a final thing, and when you've had tragedy through your family, and then you bring up something of another parent or relative, whatever, it does become kind of like you just don't want to talk about it because then it brings up other things of past deaths or how things were handled, and then it gets messy, and it can get real messy, and it can get real confusing, and it can get real who gets the family heirlooms and who gets this or inherits this, or then it becomes greed where you lose the placement of the thought of the person you were with, to give them a respect of
right.
Let's honor this person however you want to do it. If you want to have a funeral or a celebration or tea,
right,
it's
or a drum circle,
right? It's just honoring, I think, that person before they go, and knowing that they're always there.
Yeah,
as you and I, we know they're always there because we're surrounded with other spirits. Right. But you have some examples of other cultures besides ours of how they celebrate it.
Right. Because we were saying, I should say, any of the funerals that I've ever attended have pretty much all been the same. The relatives and friends, they all arrive in black. Always in, pretty much always in black. And, you sit down in the church or the synagogue, and there's this somber ceremony, and there's prayers said, people share memories, you cry, and then everybody walks out really slow, goes to your cars and gets behind the hearse and goes to the graveyard. And then you got to do the lowering down where there's more prayers and more tears and flowers. And then everybody just goes to some of the family's house. where, you know, you show up with food and, you know, like you're all standing around sort of milling about with memories and this and that and the other, and, you know, trying to not make the other person, you know, that just had the death, or if you're that person, they're trying to like not trigger you when you're I mean, it's like you said, it can get very complicated and very emotional. And then yeah, if you've got anything, you know, dealing outstanding like with wills or tests, I mean, just oh my god, it can be such an ordeal. But it's so, I don't know, all the funerals I've ever been to are just so bland. And to put it frankly, um and the practices that we have, no matter where you are actually so ingrained like as a part of our culture. But there's, I don't know, there's so many different varied traditions around the world that reflect a wide spread of beliefs and values that I think in their own way are definitely no less valuable, is not the right word, significant.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them are kind of weird. I mean, even for me, they're kind of, I was like, oh, well, that's, I mean, unusual. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily think about busting out grandma and having tea with her mummified body. That's not something I would have necessarily have thought of. Yeah, but they do it. So like, for instance, there is, let me see, I got my notes right here. I'll mess it up. In Tanah Toraja in eastern Indonesia, hopefully I didn't butcher that, funerals are actually really big parties that involve all members of a particular village or family. That can be, you know, it's like day parties that last for days or weeks. Theirs is really interesting though, is that the families will save up for long periods of time to raise the money and the resources for like an exceptionally lavish funeral with, you know, a sacrificial water buffalo and all kinds of things down that line, which is really cool. But the water buffalo is said to carry the deceased soul into the afterlife. So, but until that moment, which can actually take up several years after the physical death of the person, to raise those resources, the dead relative is actually referred to in this culture as the person who is sick, or even who is asleep, the person who's asleep.
Oh, wow.
I don't even call them dead until they have that funeral, which that person could be dead for several years until they have the funeral.
Wow.
So the person who's passed are actually, they're laid down in rooms in the family home, which is kind of like what you were talking about with the early settlers where they did home funerals.
Mm-hmm.
But the bodies are actually symbolically fed and cared for, and they put clothes on them, and they take them out, and they do, you know, like take them to parties, and they're actually like still an act, more or less to their mind, an active member of the family until they can perform that funeral.
Wow.
Which is wild, super wild. And I don't know if I can share this. Maybe it'll share. There's I have saved. Maybe it'll share. Oh, there we go. Show this to the viewers, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, is that this is actually an image of a family in Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
With their loved one.
Wow.
This lovely grandmother right here in the middle. And you see how well preserved she is.
That's crazy.
And they clothe her. She's still got a full head of hair.
Right?
And they're just, you know, posing for your family picture with grandma. Wow. Grandma's not dead. Grandma's asleep. Isn't that wild?
It's like, wow, okay.
Right? So that's one, for instance.
Cool. All right. I like it.
Right. Another one that a lot of people actually may be familiar with is the New Orleans jazz funeral. So that's something that is in our culture, but it actually takes from West African, French, and African American traditions, where it's more of a balance between joy and grief, as the mourners are led by a marching band. So most people know about that, is that this it's really boisterous, super jazzy, this big funeral procession. At first, the band will play more sorrowful songs, but once the body is buried, they actually shift into the celebration and go to a more upbeat note.
Mm-hmm.
And cathartic dancing along, it's like the jazz dancing and getting into the music is actually considered a really important part of the event to commemorate the life of the person who has passed. So that's a completely different left field than most people in Western culture celebrate. And I think that's, because you're incorporating these other, like, West African, French influences from,
Mm-hmm.
like all of the Creole tradition and all of that stuff. That's their version of how they evolved after the settling of all of these, mergers and all of that stuff. So that's
There's a lot of blendedness still through America, most definitely.
Right.
Not all boring.
Right. Not all boring, but I think it's a really interesting way to show, like, somehow in some ways those traditions can still be seen to be brought through into the modern day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a modern version of it. So I'm sure in the like French Afro, like West African culture after the colonization over there, that happened. I'm sure music and dancing, all of that, was a huge part of the celebration of the funeral of someone's passing. So
definitely.
it may not be the same music. It may not be exact, but it's the idea of the energy behind it has kept on and has pulled through, and held on to its own tradition.
They adapted, right? They adapted to their surroundings. So they're in this place where there's also French, and then you have the African American, and then they blended it. They made it work where how can we have our funeral but not be maybe seen in such a way of a tribal way of they're going to play the jazz music, right? It's different. Yeah, so totally, it's awesome.
Super cool, right? Yeah. So here's one that's really crazy. This is a more speaking of more modern, this is a newer one that I didn't even know about. South Korean burial beds. So apparently in South Korea, a law was passed in 2000. So, okay, 20 years ago, but I mean, 20 years as opposed to 200. A law passed in 2000 requires anyone burying a loved one to actually remove the grave after 60 years. Apparently, because of dwindling graveyard space and this resulting law, cremation has become much more popular, which would make sense. But families don't always opt for ashes. Apparently, several companies there will compress the remains into, it's burial beads, not burial beds, burial beads. I misread that. I was going to say, I'm like, where is this coming from? Companies will compress the remain. I've heard of this. I've heard of, but I didn't realize that this is where they did it or where it started. Compress the remains into a gem, like turquoise, a gem-like bead, and turquoise or black. And these death beads are then displayed in the home. So yeah, I've heard of getting your loved one turned, basically like the ashes compressed into a diamond, and then you could put that diamond into a ring or a pendant or something, and then you can literally pass grandma down as an heirloom, which is pretty wild,
right?
I kind of like the idea of my body becoming a diamond. I don't know,
right?
I've got my own death ritual that I want people to follow for later. Maybe we can end on that note, because mine it's pretty ridiculous. I still hope it happens. Gosh, we've already gone through so much time. Oh, here's one. This was interesting, talking about when you were talking about the animism of Native American culture and how sometimes in their ritual they would more or less feed the land or feed nature with the body. There's something called a sky burial in Mongolia and Tibet, where a particular sect of Buddhists in Mongolia and Tibet believe in the transmigration of spirits after death, and that the soul moves on and the body, of course, becomes an empty vessel, which, right? We know it's more or less fair enough. But here's the thing that goes along with that, though, is that to return it to the earth, the body is actually chopped into pieces and then placed on a mountaintop, which exposes it to the elements, including the vultures. And it's a practice that's been going on for thousands of years. And according to a recent report, which maybe in the last 5 years or so, about 80% of Tibetans will still choose it.
Wow.
Will choose a sky burial. And another thing I remember reading about these a little bit more in depth is that apparently, speaking of, like rituals and taboos, apparently it's considered bad luck for any of the family members to witness any of that reclamation by the elements happening to their family member. So it's like they go and they put out the pieces, or they have someone put out the pieces. And then once it's all picked clean, then the family members can go and like collect up the bones and such to like preserve or display or do what they do with them. But apparently it's actually bad luck to interfere or be witness to the sky burial if you're a member of that family, which is interesting.
That is really interesting. But
Right?
then I kind of see, I don't think I'd want to see.
Right. Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, I could see why they would have started that sort of old wives' tale, more or less, of it, being bad luck to see that, because it's like that would give you friggin' nightmares to see grandma.
Yeah, maybe that's the bad luck they're talking about.
Right. All right.
Keep it happy. Keep it free.
Right. Great. Another really cool one, speaking of giving back to the earth, is a green funeral. And so, speaking of the U.S., like we're starting to evolve now again out of the old traditional funeral style, and that more and more people now are opting for environmentally friendly burials, which means skipping the embalming process, nixing the traditional concrete vaults, and getting biodegradable woven willow caskets, which decompose into the ground. Another option, here we go, is becoming a more memorial reef ball. A company called Eternal Reefs compresses remains into a sphere that is attached to the reef in the ocean, providing a habitat for sea life.
Yep.
I've also heard of the ones of where they basically plant you with a tree seed, and you become food for a tree.
Yep. There's a place too in northern Washington that you can donate your body, and it will turn in. They use it as compost. And so you just go just lay out there and turn to compost, and then be in a garden someday.
Right. Super cool. Kind of, there's so many interesting ways. Like now I may have to rethink my idea. I don't know. It's like I don't have enough bodies to do all that.
Oh my, what are you going to do?
I want to do all the different ones. And one more before we start closing it out, or like one more interesting one at least, is that in Ghana they have something called a fantasy coffin. So it says in Ghana, people aspire to be buried in coffins that represent their work or something that they loved in life. These so-called fantasy coffins were recently popularized by BuzzFeed, which showed images of 29 outrageous ones, ranging from a coffin shaped like a Mercedes-Benz to an oversized fish to a really big Bible.
Yes, I've seen that. That's so funny.
Right, and I'm seeing ones right here. I have another photo to share. This one's really wild. Is that, so you've got like a chicken. There's one crab that looks like a piece of corn or some kind of thing. There's a soda can back there. There's a big fish. There's there's an airplane.
That's awesome.
But it's really wild is the artistry that goes into. That's a coffin. That's a crab.
That's pretty cool.
And the chicken, like how it actually, the artistry of it is really, really wonderful. I love it. You can see that big bass in the background or whatever that is.
Yep.
All painted up.
That's pretty cool.
Right? How cool is that? So those, for instance, for the widening of your brain cells, are some of the world's different and unusual burial funeral rituals. And it's also worth noting, while we're on the topic of unusual, is that It's not actually always black that signifies death. That's mostly a Western thing. Apparently, other colors such as white, purple, gray, green, and even yellow, depending on the culture, will mark the passage of life. So it's either used in the funeral or to denote mourning. Like I believe, what is it? The Japanese culture, they use white, which for us is a wedding color, which originally wasn't even a wedding color until Queen Victoria, and we won't even get into that. But I mean, you know, it's like, where do these traditions all come from? It's so interesting.
To come from somewhere and then hold on to them.
Right.
Or don't hold on to them and move on, or just become numb to the whole situation.
Right. Yeah. Let's not do that either.
No. It's death is the thing that I've learned to appreciate, learn not to be scared of it, and that our time here is precious, but it's not final.
Right.
And yeah, to really like just, you're honoring past lives, but honoring a process of when someone goes, you can be sad, have your moment, but then just know, like, they're right there.
They're there.
Literally right
There's
there.
There's a really good chance, that they're standing right there.
Right? Or you can go, hey, can you just drop me a sign?
And they will.
They will.
I cannot tell you the different times that's happened. I think we've even talked about this in a previous podcast, where you'll have dreams or visions like the night before or the night of someone passing, and them coming to you and saying, hey, I'm peacing out. Don't feel sorry. Don't feel sad for me. You know, and they'll come and they'll visit. I've had pets do that.
Yeah.
Like they'll come in dream time and then you never see them again.
I've had my dad come through several times in my dreams to help me out with something, or, you know, and it's
so they're not
like,
gone.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was really okay.
Right? So nobody's ever gone.
No.
It's just that you're go around and this body is.
Yeah.
Just because the car breaks down doesn't mean the driver is dead.
Oh, I like that. Clever. It's totally true.
Hey,
oh my God.
The car can shut, the wheels can go, the transmission, the computer, the engine can go, but does that mean that the driver is dead?
Nope.
Not necessarily. Nope.
That's great. I love that saying.
Just because the car breaks down.
Right. Just make sure to take care of your
take care of your car for as long as possible. Yeah, do lots of good oil changes, you know, keep it lubricated, you know, check the air in the tires, right? You know, be smart.
Right. But, take care of it.
But that doesn't mean that when it's, you know, I mean, if you got a car that, dear God, that's got 500,000 miles on it, and she finally breaks down, I mean, you're like, all right, we had a good run.
Right.
Thank you very much. New car.
Woohoo.
And it is the same for us.
I mean, keep going.
Keep on trucking. Oh my goodness. That was a good one.
That was great.
Do you have any closing thoughts on that one? Because I mean, I shared a whole bunch of different wild things we talked about. We kind of went all over the board, but we kind of just wanted to explore some of the different rituals and maybe what was behind them, and maybe share some different perspectives on what funeral and death
I think
can be.
It makes me want to revisit my own life situations, because there's been a lot of death throughout my life and how people died. So it makes me want to kind of go back, and like I mentioned, of not talking to my brother about, you know, what happens to mom. So I think if anything I've learned I just got to look at that and not fear it, and, you know, I got to move on from it. And because being intuitive, being, you know, a medium, it's nothing to fear. And it's a beautiful thing that around the world there's so many different types of ways that we have death rituals, of how we bury, body or keep them out for a few years.
Right.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
I get it, because that's what they know and that's okay. So it makes you look at myself, I don't know why I can't talk
about
today.
It's the same kind of concept as the people that, keep their parents cremated on the mantle.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're just keeping the physical body of them around.
Mm-hmm.
We just do it differently. I mean, but it's kind of the same sentiment, I imagine. Or
most
similar.
definitely. It is. It's something to kind of just, do you need to hold on to those kind of things?
Right.
But that's a whole other segment.
Speaking of which, this will be bonus content.
Ooh. Ooh. Do.
I was talking about the strange thing that I want to do with my body when I die.
Oh.
It's really not that strange. It's more of me just having a really big joke. I love archaeology. I love Egyptology. I love all of that stuff. Definitely been into digging into history and Atlantean and Egyptian and, Sumerian and all of these cool things. I also have other ties to different eras, like very early Victorian, things like that. So, along with the idea of seeing bits of information, for instance, where they found frozen mummified bodies that are 10, 12, 15,000 years old that have tattoos.
Sweet.
And they're clear, more or less. Granted, fucking mummified body, but
right.
It's like, oh, you could tell that this was some kind of four-legged animal, probably a deer. Or it's like you could tell that here's like they did rows of, what could be water or something like that, right?
Oh,
There's imagery that is recognizable from 12 to 15,000 years ago.
Wow.
On this mummified body, on these mummified bodies. They still have hair. Fucking crazy. So I'm putting all of these things together, and I want to do like a really big joke on archaeologists in the future. This is like me and this is me playing Doctor Who in the human way. Is that I want to get a mausoleum.
Okay.
And fill it with all the different shit of all the different eras that I love. And the closer to real vintage, true article I can get, the better. Like if I could actually get an Egyptian vase that's real from ancient times, and then stuff from the Victorian era, a furniture piece of here, a mirror from there, blah, blah, blah,
right.
Baroque mirror from this, right? Just fill my mausoleum with shit of all of these different time periods.
Yes.
And then, of course, then there's going to be me, mummified, with all of the tattoos that I do have and will have in the future, in a Victorian gown. Inside a sarcophagus. Inside the mausoleum. So, in 1,000 years, when they dig my ass up, I want them to be like, what the holy fuck?
Daniella, they're just gonna think you're a collector. But whoa. They really went out on this one. What all shit. Woo, we hit the jackpot on this. But they'll study you, all right. What's wrong with her brain?
That's what I want.
That's pretty funny.
That's what I want to throw a giant. I want to throw a giant punk on some archaeologists about 1,000, 2,000 years in the future. My gift to you.
Gotta find
go. Enjoy.
You gotta get like a rock from the moon or something.
Yes, like absolutely. Yes, I need to get the dagger. I need to get King Tut's dagger. That's a meteorite. Put that shit in there.
Right.
That's what I want to do. That's always I want to do that for decades.
Have you collected anything yet?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You're on it. Okay.
Don't you worry.
Oh my god.
So there you go. That's the bit of fun that I'm gonna have.
That's awesome.
A bit of ridiculousness for me as always.
I'll go to it. I'll go to your funeral.
Yep, and nobody's allowed to cry at my funeral. Everybody has to be partying. It has to be a party. It has to be because I ain't gone. Right. I will tell everybody, if you are sad, I will haunt you.
There you go.
If you bicker over my shit, I will haunt you.
I'm gonna come back. Don't you worry.
Don't you think I can't consciously do it either? You're like, oh yeah, that's grandma. Yep, that was crazy old grandma. Yep, that was her. Yep. Her ass still following me around. So my grandkids. Just that one aspect of my consciousness that just keeps bothering them.
I want to poke you.
I'm gonna get your cheeks. I'm gonna get them.
Throw your coffee mug on the ground. Start slamming doors, turning lights off. I think I way too much.
See, that's the plans that I have for myself and my death. For my physical body. I'm gonna have a good time.
I'm gonna have an amazing time. Oh my god.
Well, there you go. Galactic explorers. Punking future archaeologists since 2020.
Right, now you have to like keep this recording and try to put it on a VHS if you can.
Oh my, yes.
That's it. Don't
yes, predicted, yes. Yes, I predicted. And then when they see it, they go, oh, okay. I don't know if I want to give it up that easy. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't know. 2,000 more years from now, is there going to be a video like? I'm like, I don't even know what you call them anymore. VCRs.
They will probably won't have the technology.
If you just have the tape, that's it. Don't put a
no player.
That's it. It's all you got.
It'll be like the episode of South Park where Cartman tries to go to the future so that he can play the Wii, but by the time he gets there, the technology is so far advanced that they can't plug the Wii into anything. So he can't play it.
See? It's perfect. It's perfect.
I love it.
Gotta do it.
All right, you guys. We've kept you enough.
I'm like, holy cow. I hope you're laughing as much as we are.
I hope you are too, yes. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for staying with us. To see what this craziness is about. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share. If you're watching us now or listening to us, should I say, on Anchor or Spotify or any of the other amazing podcast apps that are out there. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you have any comments or any topics that you'd like us to cover in the future, you can always go ahead and shoot them to us in the comments. I can talk. Or message them to us on our Anchor account. So thank you for joining us for Galactic Explorers. This has been Dallas. Actually, Dallas over there, Dallas, and myself, Daniella, exploring rituals for All Souls Day. So thank you guys for joining us and sticking around as we went through the crazy. Hopefully we shared a fun perspective with you, and maybe now you'll choose to do something different, like give your body to the vultures or make a tree. Good night.